Do you ever feel like you can understand your English teacher or non-native speakers, but when you watch a film or a series or you listen to a conversation between native speakers, you find yourself a bit lost? It sounds too fast, all the words are mixed together, and you just can't follow what's going on. And that can leave you feeling demotivated, like you're never going to get anywhere with your language learning. I understand. I have been there with my own Spanish language learning journey. The Spanish are quite famous for speaking particularly fast. It's incredibly common for people to come to me and say, I can't understand fast native speech. And so, because it's such a common issue, I have some tips for you to help with this. And let's take a look. So, tip number one is to be aware of the features of spoken English. This is incredibly important. Okay. So, firstly, think about the rhythm of English. So, let's start with stressed and unstressed words in a sentence. So this is a really important feature of English, and it's there for a reason, to draw your attention to the content words in a sentence. The content words are stressed because these are the keywords you need to catch to understand what the speaker is saying. And you'll usually find that these are main verbs and nouns. Typically, auxiliary verbs, pronouns, articles, and prepositions are unstressed because they serve a grammatical purpose. So without them, the sentence wouldn't be grammatically correct. But you don't need to hear them. You don't need to hear them perfectly clearly to understand the message. So let's take a look at this example. So you read it as, what did you do at the weekend? Now, of course, when you hear it spoken, it rarely sounds like that. So you would probably hear, what do you do at the weekend? What do you do at the weekend? And maybe it might even be reduced to, what do you do at the weekend? So this is because the key content words are do and weekend. And this is what information I want from you. Okay, so I suppose kind of a tip 1.2 is don't focus on every word. In fact, it's probably impossible to focus on every word with fast speech. You're going to get lost really quickly. You have to focus on the content words. And as your grammatical knowledge of English improves, actually your brain will fill in those grammatical gaps without you even thinking. But the content words are what are going to help you understand in that moment. Remember that not only do we have weak and strong words in a sentence, there are also weak sounds and drop syllables in individual words. So try and familiarize yourself with the pronunciation of these words. So some common ones are things like business, we don't pronounce that middle I. Vegetable, that middle E there, it's not vegetable. And something like chocolate. So if you're expecting chocolate or chocolate, that is going to confuse you. It's going to be more difficult. In fact, if you want some help with that, you could check out my videos on pronunciation mistakes to double check which words learners typically have difficulty with, and then hopefully you'll know what to expect when you're listening as well. So that's dropped syllables. And then there are also weak sounds or weak syllables within words themselves. And that's particularly relevant when vowels get reduced. And vowels often get reduced to a schwa. So let's take a look at some of those. So we have do, which when it's a main verb, it will be pronounced in its strong form, do. Then when it's an auxiliary verb, it's often pronounced as a weaker sound and it will become a schwa. Remember, the schwa is pronounced so do becomes duh. Do you want to go out? What do you do for a living? Yeah, duh as the auxiliary and do as the main verb. To will become t. I'm going to the beach. I'm going to the beach. For will become f. I'm going on holiday for a week. I'm going on a holiday for a week. If you contrast it, if everything is strong, then it's going to sound quite unnatural. I am going on holiday for a week sounds quite robotic. And if we say I'm going on holiday for a week, it sounds much more natural and connected. I'm going to do the next two together in a question. So we've got are, which becomes a. You've got you, which becomes y. So, where are you going? Where are you going? Yeah. Are is an auxiliary. You is a pronoun. In this case, it doesn't need to be emphasized because I'm asking you the question. You don't need to hear the full form of you. I'm not emphasizing where are you going. If my focus was on you, I would make that the strong form. But in this case, it's not that. I'm interested in where you are going. I'm not interested in the fact that it's you going somewhere. I hope you can see the difference there. Okay, so this isn't a complete list, but I want to highlight this last one for you because I've noticed that it causes a little bit of confusion, and this is them in its strong form. But you probably won't hear that in every sentence. You'll hear them. For example, it's their wedding next week. What did you get them? Okay, like I said, that isn't a complete list, and the schwa appears in loads and loads of words. Look out for it when you check the pronunciation of a new word because you will come across it, even when it's not in connected speech, but especially in connected speech. So please be aware of the schwa. So there are other features of connected speech which I think we need to take a look at. And these are all ways that we can link different words together in connected speech. And this is also super important for your pronunciation as well. Listening and pronunciation are really closely linked. And so generally speaking, my students who find listening difficult tend to have weaker pronunciation as well. And if you think about it, that makes sense because if you aren't pronouncing the words correctly, then you're not going to recognize the correct pronunciation of them when someone says it, particularly in fast connected speech. And also how one word sounds alone can often sound when linked with another word, as we just saw with those words before, and we're going to look at some more now. So in this case, you wouldn't say I read an article, you would say I read an article. And do you see how that N and that A, the fact that the N in an and the A in article there, they get pushed together. And the technical term for this is catenation, which means binding, like fusing, pushing things together. There. So that helps it to sound more natural and to flow from one sound into the next. I read an article. But what if I don't use the indefinite article? What if I use the definite article the here? Maybe that's appropriate in this context. Again, I'm not going to say I read the article, but equally I can't use catenation. So in this case, I'm going to use a different linking technique. I'm going to use elision, which is basically a technical word for getting rid of something, for dropping something. And elision can be letters, sounds, syllables, many things. Remember something like contractions, I've, don't, doesn't, haven't, hasn't. All of those contractions are actually examples of elision. We are eliding or eliminating something in contractions. So going back to our example here, which wouldn't be I read the article, it would become I read the article. And as you can see, basically we eliminated the D, the became the, and blended in nicely with the next word, article. I read the article. I read the article. So this is really common. This elision is really common with D's and T's at the end of words. Then closely linked to elision is what we call assimilation, which basically means to change a sound in connected speech. And the reason that we do this is because it's easier for the mouth to move from one sound to the next. Otherwise, we'd have to stop, reform the shape of the mouth, and then continue speaking, and it would give a rather stilted or unnatural flow to our speech. So some examples are when D is followed by a K sound, the D is often pronounced as a G sound. For example, she would come if she could. So we don't say she would come if she could. Well, you might do if you were particularly emphasizing would, but typically in connected speech, it would come out she would come if she could. So would kind of becomes like a woog sound, but you're not really aware of that because you're speaking so quickly and your mouth changes from the D to the C so fast. It doesn't have time to form a full D, so it goes to a G sound, which is closer to the C sound, and therefore comes out like that. Another example is when N is followed by the G sound, the N becomes ng. And that's quite logical again because the mouth knows that it has to move from the ng to the ng, and so it naturally goes ng. For example, they scored one goal. One goal. Can you hear the difference? One goal and one goal. One goal, one goal. The next two examples are with those D's and T's again, I'm afraid. So when T is followed by Y, we get this ch sound, yeah? Don't ch, like the ch sound. So it's rare for us to say don't you. We would often say don't you, or even don't ya. And then when the D is followed by the Y, like in did you, it will become did you or did ya. So there you have some common changes that occur when we link some sounds together. That is not all of them, there are more, but this is an example, and the point here today is to raise awareness of the fact that this happens in connected speech, because I think awareness is half the problem. Being aware that maybe the sounds are not going to sound like you would normally expect them in individual words. And strangely, another thing you might hear when listening to natural connected speech is an extra sound, or intrusion as it's known. This is when another sound is added to help the speaker, or it intrudes. That's where the word intrusion comes from, to help the speaker move smoothly from one vowel sound to another vowel sound. And so the ones you need to know are y, the Y sound, the W sound, and the R. You know, in British English, we don't usually sound the R, but there are times when you need to help you move smoothly from one vowel to another. So we use the Y sound when one word ends in I, E, A, or Oi, and the next word begins with another vowel. For example, I am, we are, I eat, he agrees. Yeah, he agrees. It's not he agrees. He agrees. Okay, it helps you to move smoothly. Then we have the intrusive w sound, which comes after the vowels that are higher and formed at the back of the mouth, such as oo, o, and ow. For example, I've got to eat, and so on, And the final intrusive sound, certainly in British English, is the intrusive R, which is when an R sound, it doesn't have to be an R letter, but an R sound is followed by a vowel. So, for example, there are is there are, there are. There is, there is. It sure is, it sure is. They saw a, they saw a. Not they saw a, they saw a. Okay, so that was an incredibly long tip one, but I think it's really, really important to be aware of these features of connected speech. So I'll finish on that, and then we'll look at point 2, which is try and get used to natural speech. So we've talked about the features of fast and connected speech, which are extremely important. But in order to get used to these features, it's absolutely essential that you listen to natural speech in as many accents as possible, as much as possible, and I would say as early as possible in your English learning journey. So I remember taking beginner's Spanish, and I had thought the teacher would speak in English. That's probably quite naive, but he didn't, and it was quite intimidating. He could speak English and would sometimes repeat what he had just said in English, but not without having said it in Spanish first. It was natural, relatively fast Spanish, or it certainly seemed like that to me at the time. So this was before I began teaching English, and I feel like his technique has inspired me to use my natural voice while teaching English and not to talk artificially slowly. So many of my students struggle because they are just not used to natural English. And the longer you go without hearing it, even if you don't understand everything, the harder it seems to get, right? So you have to listen to fast, natural English as often as you can. It will just get you used to the rhythm and the sounds of English. That will really help. And before you know it, you'll find that it actually helps your pronunciation as well. But today we're talking about listening. And that actually leads me nicely to my next point, which is in addition to listening passively, you really must practice active listening as well as that. So this means to fully focus on what you are listening to. So passive listening is great, where you're just enjoying what you're listening to or hearing, if you like. But if you want to sharpen your listening skills, active listening is essential. Now, fortunately, there are lots of free online tools that you can use to practice your active listening. These often come with comprehension questions, and they'll give you the chance to increase or decrease the speed of the audio if you need to do that. And this is also a really effective way to improve your vocabulary, which leads me to my next tip, which is work on your vocabulary. Okay, so we talked about how content words are stressed in English sentences, but if you don't know the meaning of the content words, it's going to be truly tricky to follow what the other person is saying. If they keep repeating a content word over and over again and you don't know what that means, then you are not going to be able to follow the thread of the conversation. So, and this is all relevant. So, as an intermediate learner, you should be able to understand relatively fast speech if talking about a familiar topic, such as your immediate family. But I really wouldn't worry if the topic is something more advanced, such as, I don't know, physics, or if the speaker is using lots of idioms. Maybe they use lots of specific cultural references and terminology. For example, maybe they're talking about health and they keep mentioning the NHS this, the NHS that, which stands for the National Health Service, and it's the state healthcare system in the UK. So if you don't know what NHS stands for, that might be a little bit tricky to understand. But these are normal vocabulary gaps at specific levels throughout the journey, okay? So it's not a problem and it's perfectly fine to clarify. What is the NHS? Can you tell me what that is? Oh, we have a similar system in my country. That's absolutely fine. If there's a cultural gap, even for native speakers, they might not understand that. For example, American native speakers might not know what the NHS is in the UK. That's perfectly fine. And those gaps, those vocabulary gaps, will get filled in as you learn more English. So this is where vocabulary is really important, and the more you know, the more likely you are to recognize the words in this fast speech. My tip number 5 is to focus on body language and tone of voice, right? So if you focus on body language and facial expression, if it's a face-to-face conversation, that will help a lot in your understanding of what's going on. Or if it's by phone, or maybe you're listening to a podcast, you'll need to focus on intonation, but it will give you clues about how the speaker is feeling and help you to follow the tone of the conversation or speech. So even if you don't understand every word, you might understand that they're telling a joke or they're telling a sad story, that kind of thing, and that will really guide you in how to react and give you more clues about what they're probably talking about, even if you don't understand every single word. And tip number 6, my last tip, if you don't understand every word, that's perfectly fine. But if you find that there's a content word like we talked about before, please don't be afraid to ask for repetition. Right? It's really important to ask for repetition or clarification if you think you've missed something important, like in my previous example with the NHS. And in fact, I've got another video about ways that you can ask for repetition, and I'll put a link for that in the description box below. Okay, so I hope that these tips have been useful for you. I'd love to hear your top tips for other learners. It would be great to share those, so please leave a comment. As always, thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you later.